Hello, 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 out in Facebook land. Welcome to the 30th or so episode of Alan's Music Room, which now magically transforms into the first episode of Modern Musicology.
Woo!
And I want to say a big welcome to my two co-hosts, Anthony.
Alan, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here.
How you doing?
I am delightful, thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good. And Rob, what's going on?
Not much. How are you, sir?
Fantastic. Okay, so since this is sort of a first episode of a new show, well, a transformation from an old show to a new show, we're just going to talk about music. We're going to talk about stuff that we love. We're going to talk about, we've got a wide range of tastes. So, our discussions may start with Black Sabbath or Iron Maiden. It may jump the next. It may jump the next minute to Prince. It may go to new wave or electronica after that, and then back to, Parliament Funkadelic. It's going to be all over the place. So let's get started. We've got some news that came up this past week. I don't know, the Super Bowl just a couple of days ago announced the halftime lineup, which is kind of interesting. The Super Bowl is going to be on February 13th. It's playing at the SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California. I have no idea if it's even been said what teams are playing in it. I don't know. The extent of my sports knowledge is who's playing at the Super Bowl, right? And what commercials are going to run.
We're not there yet.
Okay, I didn't think so. Think so. But we do know who's going to be entertaining at the halftime. And this is a show that features Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, and Kendrick Lamar. So if you're talking about hip hop, this is a powerhouse lineup. I'm pretty excited about it. Snoop Dogg is just a flippin' legend. I say Eminem maybe a little bit less, but all of them are just incredible. Mary J. Blige, that chick can sing. She doesn't sing, she sang. And Kendrick Lamar, there was a lot of fuss made about his album To Pimp a Butterfly. That album is amazing. It is.
That was quite a few years ago now as well.
It was, and he released an album after that, one album so far after that, that won a Pulitzer Prize. I mean, that never happens.
Right.
So, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think it's an interesting call. I think it's obviously huge for hip hop. Obviously, you guys have been in America longer than I have. So correct me if I'm talking absolute nonsense, but I think this is the first time where a hip hop artist has been the main artist at the Super Bowl halftime show. They've done appearances. You've had, rappers appearing with other artists. I think back to when Madonna headlined and you had Nicki Minaj make an appearance, for example. Yeah. So the fact that you now have 4 hip hop artists plus, a pretty soulful singer in Mary J. Blige, it's huge for that entire genre of music. The only concern I have is with that crowd, how do you keep it safe for a family audience?
Well, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Well, I think where this gets interesting too is in a couple levels. One, the NFL is obviously going to play to its base, its audience base, which is it's basically saying to the old people, we don't care about you. It's they're kind of throwing out the more traditional stoic, because the last couple of years they've rolled out older sort of album oriented rock guys, right? They're by using Dre. I keep wanting to say Ice Cube. I'll keep doing that, but I'm trying not to. By having Dre there, for example, and having Snoop there, you are very much giving a shout out to the roots of LA hip hop. Right, in the LA rap culture, which is very, very much like New York, embedded in the fabric of the city. And with the Super Bowl being in LA, that is part of that culture. Mary J. Blige and Eminem sort of tie in a little more commercial to it as well. So I think it's them trying to do a very interesting balancing act, and I'm curious to see what Dre can do with Mary J. Blige and her voice, because Dre is very good at bringing together different types of styles and things like that. It is going to be different. I think these guys are all like really excited to do something. I mean, we all know what Snoop's going to do. I mean, Snoop Dogg's going to be Snoop Dogg. It's you know,
and there ain't nothing wrong with that either.
And you know that's going to be but what's wrong? I mean, every year it's always been kind of heavy or just kind of thing. And this time, as opposed to last year, we had Weekend. It was just like a visual overload, right?
Right.
The music was great, but you're like too busy watching everything. You kind of got lost, right? This year, I think is going to be like very dynamic in what they're trying to do, and it's more about the music than I think the presentation, and I think that'll be interesting.
And Rob, you mentioned, they're kind of saying, like, sticking the proverbial middle finger up towards the older audience. I'm not sure that's the case. You know, NWA NWA hit the scene 35 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that first album came out, sorry guys, I'm going to make you feel old here, before I was actually born. Dr. Dre emerged as a solo artist in the early 90s.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously Eminem ties in because Dre was his mentor. So I get where they're coming from with it. I think it's pretty cool overall.
Yeah, I think it's cool too, but they're going to lose like, old white guys that want Aerosmith or the Kid Rock, and that's kind of what I was going for, is that large base of people that like want to rock out every year with their Journey or their Kid Rock or their Springsteen or Aerosmith.
Well, okay, true.
That type of stuff where it's been very heavy in the past. That sort of like arena rock kind of thing. It's a departure from that.
But I think the last arena rock was 11 years ago with the Who.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I mean, and once Snoop Dogg comes out with Gin and Juice, you're gonna have the audience in your back pocket.
Yeah.
I mean, so I think it's gonna play well. I think they're gonna.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's gonna be really good. Another thing that just happened, I think, Friday, so just 2 days ago, David Lee Roth has announced his retirement from the music scene. Bombshell.
Yeah.
Well, he's got a short residence lined up in Vegas, a 5-performance run, and he says that's going to be it for him. So there you go. No more Diamond Dave. What will he possibly do without an audience to adore him?
Life goes on without him.
That was good.
I could very easily see him doing like a podcast or a book or something. Or some kind of reality TV thing, But I also think some of this too is like, he can't go back to Van Halen. And I think some of this is, I'm wondering how much of this is, if you put Van Halen to bed, do you put David Lee Roth to bed too? Is a lot of this connected? I'm probably just being weird and metaphysical and old. But I think, I haven't thought about David Lee Roth in a very long time. So I'm happy that he's ending his career on his terms.
Yeah, and he's probably going to, he's quite a prolific artist. So he's probably going to pour his energy into that when he's done with music.
Does he paint?
I think he does paint.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I also can't see him sitting still long enough to actually write a book.
Yeah.
So anyway, my buddy Cortland Lewis chimed in to say hello. He's at the Alice Cooper and Ace Frehley show.
That's awesome.
Oh, man. I want to get their whole tour. Ace is opening for Alice. The entire tour, the only drop in Atlanta, Ace is not on the show. So Ace played a show here separately, but they're not together at the date here, which disappoints me.
And isn't it good? Aren't they doing like a Alice Cooper Day in Milwaukee or something? I might have read that, but they're doing something cool for that for Milwaukee.
Yes, they are. They are. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Milwaukee. Yeah, exactly. So, Diamond Dave has not been, the powerhouse performer that he used to be in a long time. And there were those videos that came out of his solo tour last year that just sounded horrific. So I think it's the right time for him to, pack it in.
Well, he hasn't done a solo album since 2003. So,
yeah.
you know, between that and A Different Kind of Truth in 2012, that's been his output for the last 20 odd years. And that's it. I mean, I'm with you. I think he's kind of a spent force creatively.
And plus, he just looks like a grandpa on stage. I mean, he just doesn't have the energy anymore. I mean, it's sad, but it's kind of the truth. One other little item, and this is kind of a weird one. Danny Elfman is organizing a live performance of Nightmare Before Christmas, and Billie Eilish has been cast as Sally.
Well, the whole casting's kind of cool too. They got Weird Al.
Right.
You know, it's a little offbeat.
It is. I just can't see Billie as Sally. I just can't see it.
I think she'll surprise people. You
I
know,
think she will.
A lot of her hits have been the kind of mumble type stuff that she's been doing, but she proved with her Bond song that she can sing.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that this is going to be sort of a Lady Gaga moment where she has done her thing for a while, and then she came out with that album with Tony Bennett and just blew people away with what a spectacular voice she has and what a great performer she is. So I'm hoping that this is Billie Eilish's moment to kind of show a new dimension to her shtick.
And I think that's the plan. I mean, this is obviously very well thought out and very planned. Right. And I don't think, as particular as Danny Elfman is about his music and everything he does, this kind of makes sense. Although it doesn't seem like it does.
Right.
And when you mentioned we were talking about this, I was trying to think of who can he get? There's a lot of people he would get that we'd all say, is this not going to work or not work either? So, but I think picking somebody who is at the top of their game, who's also really, really out there, is going to get him a lot more listeners that may not have heard him or his music before. But I also think that it's going to really propel her. I think she's got a lot more shot. Having her in the Bond record, she's got some new stuff going on, and she's very much trying to burst out of her preconceptions that the media has about her.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. It's just it's a dicey one,
but it's still pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess.
Alan, I can tell that you are a big Billie Eilish fan from your extreme enthusiasm for this entire project.
I have really, really tried.
I know you have.
I have tried to like her, and I just can't when this is how she delivers her songs. It just bugs the snot out of me.
I'm just excited to have Danny Elfman back in any way, shape,
or form. That's a good point. So I've got one other news item, unless you guys have something that you want to toss in. Y'all got anything to throw in here?
Unless we want to talk about what we've been listening to right now, but I figured that was after this.
Yeah.
My only other news item that I can think of is that the track listing has been announced for the next Bowie career retrospective box set, which covers the 90s. And so, of course, Anthony, I think both of you know that the 90s is kind of my favorite Bowie period. I mean, the 70s are amazing, and I really love the 80s, but the 90s just kill me. I mean, I think he was as creatively daring and challenging to his audience and to himself in the 90s as he was in the 70s. And I just flippin' love that. Love that whole era.
Yeah.
So it's a weird box set. It's going to include an album called Toy, which never got released. And it's a strange album in that it was a few new tracks. It was a few tracks that ended up getting reworked and featured on his next album, and reworkings of quite a few of his 60s songs in new arrangements and new recordings and stuff. Weird.
Yeah.
A lot of it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I didn't expect to see that would ever get, an official release.
Yeah.
I did. I honestly expected it would be in this box set because 2 box sets ago, they got an awful lot of press with the Gouster, which was the early version of what became the one with Fame on it. What the hell's the album I'm trying to think of?
The Lodger? No.
No. Young Americans. Young Americans.
God damn.
And so they and even though all that stuff had been released, here and there, like as a single B-side and bonus tracks on releases or whatever, putting it all together in one package with new cover art, let them say a whole brand new Bowie album that's never been released before, out of the vaults. And they got a lot of press from that, and that's what they're going to do with this one too. Even though a lot of these tracks have been released as single B-sides or as bonus tracks, there's a couple of things that have never been released. There's one track called Hole in the Ground, which is fantastic, and it's never been released. You can find it on YouTube because everything's findable on YouTube. But so, that's going to be the big selling point for this box set, is a complete Toy album.
Yeah, I mean, there was a version that leaked in 2011.
Yes.
Which had some things that ended up on Heathen, as an example. So,
yeah,
I did notice those two tracks are not on the official release, which makes sense. Why would you release something here when you're eventually going to get around to Heathen anyway?
Exactly right. But so a lot of people are kind of griping that the Toy versions of those songs aren't on Toy, but
yeah,
people
are going to find something to complain about no matter what, particularly when you have a fan base as passionate as Bowie's.
Exactly.
And the thing that's great is like they control the narrative now. The stuff's always out there, people can get it, but now it's a good quality, it's remastered, it's in a format and a presentation that they view as being, professional and sounding well. And I think that's the driving force of it. I don't think this is like a money grab. I think this is a really intelligently thought out process of how to release his back catalog. Right. And I think we're just I think it's this time next year we're going to find something else even more exciting about that catalog to get released, which is going to be great.
And very likely because Warner Brothers just licensed that whole catalog.
Yeah.
And they've got plans to do stuff with it too.
Yeah, I think Warner in like the next 5 years, it's just going to re-release Bowie and Madonna, and that's it. I think that's all that's happening.
I mean, that's all they need to make some money.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty excited to hear remastered versions of Earthling and Outside.
Absolutely.
I don't even need Toy. I'm really excited about those.
I like Outside a lot.
Outside is my favorite Bowie album.
Really?
My favorite. I think it's flippin' genius. I absolutely love it. So a lot of the songs on Outside came from this big jam session that he and Eno and the studio musicians just kind of came in a room, and Eno did his weird, things where he passed out cards that say, play like you're standing on your head, or that, nonsense like that. And so these jam sessions, eventually were kind of pared down and turned into the songs that end up being about half of Outside. And all those recordings exist, and, they've all been bootlegged to death. And, none of that stuff is in this box set, which is kind of disappointing, but.
Well, I did see outside of the box set, they're doing a 3-disc version of Toy. I almost wonder if Outside is going to be getting the same treatment.
That's what I keep wondering too.
I think that the later albums are getting that. I think those 90 albums are all going to get their own big push remasters, because I think that with the exhibition, I think the one thing about that Bowie exhibition that a lot of people left feeling is that, wow, I know people that are lifetime Bowie fans that are like, wow, I never really thought of his albums in the 90s that seriously, right? And I think that the passage of time has made those records more important and more relevant.
Yeah.
And like, I certainly love them. I think Heathen is just maybe his most underappreciated record. I love it to death.
It's amazing.
What I love about those later eras, and Alan, you kind of touched on this, is how experimental he is.
Yeah.
You go from Outside, which had some really heavy tracks on it, some really heavy guitars, and then the very next album, you're getting elements of drum and bass with tracks like Little Wonder. Yeah. Like, he was not afraid to just genre hop in a way he had never really done before.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, at that point, he's making records that he's listening to, and he doesn't care what anybody thinks.
And I think by that stage of his career, he'd earned the right to feel like that.
And I think that, what's interesting is that a lot of drum and bass sounds dated now, but his drum and bass doesn't, which I think is really, really a tribute to him.
Well, what's interesting about a lot of drum and bass is that that's when sampling really started to get heavy, and most people sampled other things. Bowie and his people sampled themselves. They created all the sounds that are sampled, except for a couple of pieces of dialogue that come from other places.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all of it are sounds that they created and then sampled and then manipulated into what became Earthling, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about new releases really quickly. Anthony, what you listening to?
Ghost, the new Ghost track, Hunter's Moon. It hit, I want to say it was midnight on Thursday morning / Wednesday night, Thursday morning. I think according to Last FM, I listened to it 30 times on Thursday. I was literally sitting with it there on repeat.
Oh my gosh.
When I wasn't in meetings at work. So I'm obsessed. For me, Ghost had been one of my favorite bands for the last, I don't know, 5-6 years at this point. Everything that Tobias Forge does to me is more or less genius. And I'm really, really excited for the new album when it comes out next year.
Awesome.
Highly recommend Hunter's Moon.
Awesome. Rob, what you listening to?
Man, that's a long question. That's like asking who your favorite.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
You DJ for a living, so you listen to everything.
Well, no, it's just the amount of the hardest thing is there's just so much of it now. It's
I know.
Just like, so just picking something out of a hat. There's a Velvet Underground documentary coming out.
Yes.
Very soon. It's
Yes.
going to be at the Chicago Film Festival in a couple weeks, and it's making the rounds at festivals. It's coming out, I think, in November. But there is a tribute record called "I'll Be Your Mirror," which is the songs of the Velvet Underground and Nico. And if you're a fan of REM, for example, you've got Michael Stipe doing Sunday Morning. You've got the Fontaines DC doing Black Rebel Death Song. You've got Courtney Barnett on it. There's a ton of people doing Velvet Underground songs, and it's pretty cool.
Kurt Vile is on it. St. Vincent.
Yeah, Matt Berlinger from the National.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I've heard a couple of tracks from it, and it's really good.
The Stipe track is really much more interesting than I expected it to be, and the Fontaines DC track is great too.
REM did some covers of Velvet Underground stuff in their early days.
Yeah.
So I know that Stipe has that connection to that band.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool.
But it's a when you hear the tribute things come out,
yeah,
half of you go, at least I do. I'm like, oh, this is going to be just really terrible. And it's really hard to nail a good tribute record.
Yeah.
And this hits a lot of different marks.
To that point, Rob, one other thing I want to give a shout out to was the big tribute album for Metallica's Black Album, the Black.
Oh, that's right. That's
right. That Idols track is amazing.
But to your point, there are elements of that are incredibly hit or miss. Some bands knock it out the park. They do really, really interesting stuff. And others are just doing carbon copies of what Metallica put out. I'm like, I don't need to hear Weezer do Enter Sandman.
And that's what I was going to bring up. Weezer, who have kind of like reinvented their whole career by doing carbon copy covers of things that people love, comes out with Sandman. And I mean, do something Weezery with it. Don't just, flatline it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good, but it's just like, we can play Metallica instead.
I've never seen the appeal of Weezer, so.
Thank you.
Not even Africa by Toto?
No.
I mean, I see the appeal of Africa by Toto.
Right.
Yeah. No. Just because you can cover Africa by Toto doesn't mean you should.
Right.
I just literally, Weezer is the Norm Macdonald joke that he never got to, basically.
It's so accurate.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious.
Oh God, they're just anyway. Never mind. But the Metallica thing's interesting because if you're a fan of Metallica, you can really dig it. But if you're a casual person, like I listened to Metallica a lot when the first couple of records dropped, and it kind of got away from them for a while. And this sort of made me think about Metallica again, which is exactly what a cover record is supposed to do.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. Okay, so I have been listening to, for the last 2 days, the the brand new Yes album, The Quest. They have been talking this album up for a month or two now. They released a first single back maybe a month ago. It's called The Ice Bridge, and it was a really good track. And I was really like, dude, this is gonna revitalize my love for you. I mean, I still love all 100% of Yes, but the newer albums, have been a little weak. But Ice Bridge came out, and I thought, holy smack, this is going to be great. So then the whole album comes out Friday. It's kind of like eating porridge. It's nice porridge. It's kind of tasty, but it's just, kind of mealy and, pasty and not a lot of, form and substance to it. It's kind of sad. So check out The Ice Bridge. It's a really great track with it's got a very classic feel to it. It's got a lot of adventurous playing in it. It's got some, like a whole 2 minutes at the end of the song. It's 7.5 minutes, I think it is. And the last couple of minutes are just like a trade-off of keyboard and guitar solo by Jeff Downes and Steve Howe. And you haven't heard Yes do stuff like that on their studio albums in a long time. So I was really excited about this. And then the rest of the album is just kind of like flat.
So I missed The Ice Bridge, and then candidly, since The Quest came out, I did see it came out, but I was too busy listening to the same 4-minute track on repeat. If you were to compare it to anything else from their back catalog, is there anything? I mean, no.
The closest thing I would compare it to is the last studio album, which was Heaven and Earth, which was sort of the same, kind of Yes, but kind of anemic about it. So, it's just no bite to their music anymore at all.
I'm really
Ice
weird.
Bridge was really good. Go listen to Ice Bridge. You'll like it.
I'm really weird with my Yes preferences. My favorite Yes album is Drama, so go figure.
Oh, dude, I love Drama.
Yeah, but most people don't. I do, but most people don't.
Mine is Relayer, which is just, and of course, the other one is Topographic Oceans, which people like, it's just too much for people, but I flippin' love it. So this is obviously nothing like those. All right, so our main topic tonight is going to be us discussing the most important year in our musical development, like when we really expanded as music fans, as lovers of pop music. And Anthony, I know that you had a year picked out, but you were going to reassess and see if you were going to stick with that year. Did you? Hello?
Me?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going with 2005.
All right.
So, and to understand why, I have to give a little crash course in musical history. So, my own personal musical history, I should say. So, I turned 13 in the year 2000. Okay. So, if you think about your own musical journey as you're a kid, you're probably mostly listening to what your parents listen to up to a certain age.
Yep.
And then you kind of start to differentiate yourself. And in 2000, I heard one track on Top of the Pops that blew my mind and set my musical course for the next 5 years. And that was Iron Maiden's The Wicker Man, which was on Top of the Pops. And from that point on, I was hooked on heavy metal. I didn't listen to anything else. Right? Any flavor of heavy metal, I would listen to it, whether it was more classic stuff, whether it was death metal, black metal, power metal. that was the soundtrack for most of my time in high school. 2005, I can't quite say what changed, but suddenly I figured, I really do still love metal, but there are other things out there that I want to explore. And so I found myself looking back at what my parents listened to. I found myself looking back at the 90s Britpop scene as well. So Oasis, Blur, and particularly Suede. And I started getting into progressive rock.
Yeah.
As well. So I actually, my path out of listening to metal was a friend of mine sent me, I think the first 3 Genesis albums, and by that I'm from Genesis to Revelation doesn't count. So we're talking Trespass,
Right.
Foxtrot, and the other one is slipping my mind.
Nursery Crimes.
Nursery Crimes. And The Knife just about resonated enough with my heavy metal brain.
There you go.
To get me to listen to more. And I listened to the others, and I discovered, the title track of Musical Box and Supper's Ready. And this kind of set me down a progressive rock path and led to me listening to Marillion and to Yes and to Pink Floyd. And it just had this cascading effect. And as I discovered the little things that each of those bands were doing across their careers, like there's a point in time when Marillion talk about how they were influenced by Radiohead. So I went off and listened to a ton of Radiohead, which led me down and up. And it just became this year for me where my musical tastes expanded exponentially. And I just became a lot more open-minded than I had been through the majority of my teenage years. Just in time for me to go to college. And, as YouTube was blowing up, so music was starting to become more accessible. It was the perfect timing because I could get hold of all of this music without spending an absolute ton on CDs.
Right. Cool. So how much of that is still, regular rotation on your turntable?
Some of it is very literally on the turntable downstairs. I would say a lot of it. I mean, the bands I keep coming back to from that time, Marillion, Suede, Porcupine Tree was another band I really got into.
Right.
Trying to
I
think
love
who
Porcupine
else.
Tree.
I mean, I listen to a lot of Blur as well still. Those are probably the biggest bands from that time. Occasionally I'll get like the hankering to listen to a particular track. I've been listening to a lot of Genesis lately just because they're touring, and while I'm not going to go see them, they're in the conversation right now. So that's made me want to go back and listen to them. I'd say those are probably the main bands. I try and think about what I've actually bought on vinyl because that's an indication I really love it and still pay attention to it. So I'd probably pick those as my main 5-ish.
Cool. Rob.
I inadvertently garanimaled my t-shirt with my ear. And I'm kind of frightened that I did this on a subconscious level. Anthony, you know what garanimals are?
I do not.
So they made these clothing lines in America called garanimals that so kids could figure out what they're going to wear. So I'm going to wear lions. So the pants and the shirt both had lions on them so you could match them. Right.
Got it.
Yeah. So I didn't mean to do that, but I kind of did. So as you can probably imagine, Alan, this was exhausting. Thank you for the homework.
My pleasure.
I went back to the great thing is I will feel old, but I will not feel as old as Alan. I went back to 1983. And so I heard a lot of music by osmosis. I grew up with my dad and his big band swing records, and my brother with his R&B soul and whatever he was picking up at whatever odd records he was hearing in the gay bar and bringing home. Right. So everything from Harold Melvin to the B-52s to Glenn Miller was in my house. It was very strange. And then I had my sisters sneaking in and out of my room at night to go see Peter Frampton. So I had a very strange musical adolescence. But 1983, I went to California. My grandma in Hollister was not doing well. So we all went out there. And my grandfather had this room. It was like his study. It was basically the coolest, walking back in time kind of study you could have. But he had a shortwave radio. Kids Ask Your Parents. And I was up late at night and I just kept flipping the dial. And after a while, you can only listen to fishing boats for so long. And I was picking up all of these indie rock college radio stations up and down the coast of California. Right. And it was just oh my God, what is this? Right. It's this is amazing. So, that's kind of when I'm okay, I want to listen to music that's not just the stuff on the radio. Right. So, that's when I first heard, the Eurythmics and Echo and the Bunnymen and U2 and Men at Work, and the Police. I mean, I'd heard a little bit of the Police before, but Synchronicity came out that year. It was everywhere. Now, a lot of this is piggybacked on MTV because you had that Police record, Synchronicity, that was everywhere. You had ZZ Top Eliminator that was everywhere. I think Motley Crue was I think really broke around then. So there's a lot of stuff going on in that year, but I just remember sort of like that started me hearing a bunch of really great records. And, that led to like, part of the reason I'm probably so disturbed is that, as a very young child, I heard OMD Dazzle Ships and Aztec Camera, Highland Hard Rain. And even Yes that year too. And Bowie's Let's Dance came out that year.
Yes.
I just remember, I actually do remember sitting in this room and hearing Let's Dance on the radio. And it was like, this is longer than what I normally hear on the radio.
Right.
And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then a couple minutes later, he played X. And then someone played, Soul Mining by the. And it was like, okay, this is pretty cool. And like, when I heard, Echo and the Bunnymen Porcupine, I would not have been able to appreciate a lot of the Britpop stuff I liked later if I didn't listen to that record. But it also made me make a left-hand turn into the Beatles and the Stones, for example, right?
Yeah.
And Bowie made me make this left-hand turn into a lot of, it connected with a lot of the soul stuff I heard, but it also made me look at, just a lot more out there stuff. Like I never probably would have heard Talking Heads without Bowie, stuff like that. And New Order's Power, Corruption, and Lies came out that year. And Tears for Fear, that first Tears for Fears record. It is still incredible.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's so different from anything they did after that, but it's so good.
It still holds up as a complete record.
Absolutely.
And, say what you want. And I know it's considered, gauche and camp, but that Color by Numbers record by Culture Club was arguably the biggest record of that year. And they were everywhere.
Yeah.
And that really sort of changed the way a lot of people think about music. You also had REM with Murmur, which I remember hearing that and going, what is this? And that sort of made me deep dive into all the Athens stuff. But then you also had Can't Slow Down, and some other stuff. So it was a very odd sort of, so I think that's it. Because that is the beginning of me sort of transitioning from like a guy who listened to the radio and heard records in my house to someone that would like actively listen to fright rock and just disturbing music for the rest of my life.
Yeah, exactly. Phil Fogel says that 1983 to 84 was the year that music changed for him as well. The whole British invasion and new wave.
Yeah. And what's weird is I wasn't a big fan of Duran Duran. But then when they put out Seven and the Ragged Tiger and they got to New Moon on Monday, I'm like, I could get behind this one.
I think that's about the same time that I really kind of latched onto them too. I mean, the first couple of albums had some, songs here and there that were okay, but it was Ragged Tiger that really started to make me think, okay, there is really something about this band.
And I remember, Anthony will love this.
Thank you for the comment, Phil, by the way.
Anthony will love this too, because I remember going to a party as a freshman in high school, just, being the weird punk new wave kid, and someone put on I think the first Metallica record.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, it's Metallica. They're like, and I just knew that because I knew a couple people that were like, well, if you like this, and this, you try Metallica. I just heard them sort of by off chance. And I just kind of remember Metallica being a deep dive a little bit into some other stuff I'd never heard before too.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. That's awesome. So my year is 1980, and that should come as no surprise to people who know me because I've posted about it a couple of times. Like I did a whole series of Facebook posts last year, actually, in 2020, the 40th anniversary of 1980. And I sort of did a month by month thing, one each day, where I just literally posted about and wrote about all the albums that came across my path in 1980. So I kind of grew up. I mean, I'm mid 70s. That's the time I grew up, not my current age. And so obviously, as a kid getting into rock and roll, Kiss. I mean, I was a Kiss freak. Lived, ate, breathed Kiss. That's all there was. Eventually somebody loaned me, and I listened to stuff on the radio too. So I was also into, like, really into McCartney and Wings. And as I've said before, Wings is kind of my Beatles, because I wasn't really aware of the Beatles when the Beatles were happening. And I got the Alice Cooper show, that album, the live album, and that introduced me to Alice Cooper. So I was really into that for a while. But then 1980 comes along, and as Rob was saying, that's when I kind of I made that transition from, just a kid who listened to the radio and bought Kiss records, and started really listening seriously to music, and collecting and building a collection for myself. And there's all these things that came. 1980 is a really interesting year. There is so much crazy stuff happening. Like, there's stuff that's kind of held on from the 70s that you're surprised that there's releasing things that late. And then there's, like, Curtis Blow has an album out in 1980, and you're like, so Curtis Blow was that early? And it's this strange year where, like, everything was kind of happening all at the same time. A couple of the things that it was an easy transition for me from Kiss was AC/DC and Black Sabbath. That was
I knew you were going to mention Black Sabbath.
That was the year that Back in Black and Heaven and Hell came out. Buddy, I was eat up with those two albums. Like, I forgot about Kiss for a while there, because 1980 was not a good year for Kiss. From 79 through up to like 83, they were kind of in this malaise of, just didn't have any direction, and they were just doing stupid stuff. And I mean, I still liked it, but it just wasn't grabbing my attention. But then AC/DC and Black Sabbath came along, and buddy, I was on board with that. I saw both of them the following year in 81, like a month apart. The For Those About to Rock tour followed literally like 3 weeks later by the Mob Rules tour. Oh my God. Amazing, amazing shows, especially the Sabbath show. That was just incredible. But I mean, there was all these other things, like, since I'd kind of got introduced to Rush a couple of years earlier in 78. Somebody loaned me a copy of their second album, Fly By Night. And then I heard 2112. So Permanent Waves comes along in 1980, and it's the first Rush album that I buy. It's the first one that I was there for when it was released. And that album just blew me away. So that really got me into a lot of different prog stuff. I started to, put out a greatest hits album later that year, and I got into that. Duke by Genesis came out that year, and I really got into that. And it's of the Phil Collins era, Duke is still my absolute favorite album. I think it's the best blend between what they were doing earlier with Peter Gabriel and sort of the more poppy stuff that they did later with Phil.
I agree.
But God, it's such a solid record. One of the things that... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, it's got that blend between kind of tracks that are a bit more proggy and screw with time signatures.
Yeah.
But then it's got radio-friendly hits that also still screw with time signatures, like Turn It On Again.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
That is such a radio bop, but man, it's got some weird timing on it.
Exactly. And then there's Misunderstanding, which I just hate. It's the only bad moment on the entire album. And so that also kind of got me really sort of used to the idea of concept albums. So then I started to get really into concept albums. But like, from my radio days, I knew Heart. Baby Lestrange, their fifth album, came out in 1980, and I glommed onto that super hard. And then I got like Then I became, I mean, I'm the drummer in a Heart tribute band now. So obviously my love for Heart has maintained over decades. Jefferson Starship. I mean, I'd known a couple of songs. Obviously, I'd heard Somebody to Love, and whatever. But they put out an album called, what the hell's it called? Freedom at Point Zero, which that's still my favorite Jefferson Starship. It's actually my favorite album of any band called Jefferson something. So I went back and I'm like a huge Jefferson Airplane fan, but Freedom at Point Zero is still my favorite Jefferson album. It's such an amazing record. So there was all this stuff that was happening. Drama by Yes, as you mentioned, came out that year, and I absolutely loved it. One of the local stations really latched onto Tempest Fugit and played that to death, and I was like, nice. Dude, this song is phenomenal. And so that really got me digging into the Yes history. Audio Visions by Kansas. I was familiar with Kansas, but I went to see Kansas in concert for the first time that year. Saw Rush for the first time that year too on the Permanent Waves tour, and that was mind blowing. Holy shit! Fleetwood Mac's first live album, well, with the Lindsay and Stevie lineup, their first live album came out that year. So that was kind of like, even though I knew all the radio hits, it was the live album that really made me a Fleetwood Mac fan, like, the whole catalog kind of thing. So in my path, where I'm like on the Kiss, train and going pretty much straight forward, I hit this wall in 1980, and like, it was like my timeline just like divided into all the possible, fractured futures, where I just went into everything that I could find. I was into some soul at the time, and funk. So man, 1980 is this explosive year for me.
And you get Devo, you get Talking Heads, you get the End of Joy Division. Yeah, you get all kinds of.
But I wasn't aware of any of that stuff in 1980. I did become later, and really latched onto some of that stuff too, especially Talking Heads. But I didn't know it in 1980.
But it's just weird that it got made that year. That's the thing.
I know, exactly.
That's that. Yeah.
I mean, what's weird about it is you think you've got stuff like that coming out, and 1980, as Alan said, you've got Heaven and Hell. That's the year the first Iron Maiden album came out as well.
Mm-hmm. Right,
so
right.
Creatively, and Judas Priest released British Steel. I mean,
yes.
Creatively, this year 1980 was just mental.
Yeah, it really was.
And Alan, it's interesting. 2112 was one of my transitional albums that got me into prog as well. Again, It's got that kind of heaviness, particularly in the Temples of Syrinx section of the title track.
Yep.
That just pulled my metalhead heart into it. I
had a friend who loaned me the LP, and my family went on a vacation to Naples, Florida, and we were staying. It's a house that we stayed in every year because it was owned by a man that my grandfather worked for or whatever. So we went there every year, and I remember taking this with me and listening to it. So I remember clearly being on the sort of like the porch and the backside looking over. This is a house that was on the canal. It had a dock that went out on the canal, and just sitting there in a chair and listening over and over and over and studying. So 2112 was like an education in music to me, in a way of playing drums, in a way of thinking about how music is structured, studying the lyrics, reading the story on the inside of the album cover, and how all that stuff sort of tied together to create this picture, this musical painting.
Yeah.
It was like watching a movie, and it was life-changing for me.
Well, I think the thing to always remember with Rush is you have 3 virtuoso musicians who can do incredible things with their instruments.
Yeah.
And you put the 3 of them together, and it was just dynamite.
Yeah. Can't be beat. And so Permanent Waves comes along in 1980, and that's sort of like we were talking about with Duke. It's a mix of their really hardcore prog era with them moving into much more of a radio accessible kind of period, because 1980, a lot of stuff like when punk kind of comes along, and 76, 77, and then dies kind of a quick death, But so we have this transition into what's going to become new wave, and everything changes for music, everything. And so these bands, these sort of legacy bands at the time, were trying to figure out how to navigate through these new waters.
Yeah, and
so
I think
it's an exciting time.
Going back to Yes, their solution was to pull in Trevor Horn,
Right,
combined with the Buggles. Who saw that coming?
Right, exactly. Crazy. All right, so that's what we've got for this week. We will be back next Sunday night at 8:00 Eastern Time with a discussion about something. We've got a few ideas. Yeah, we've got a few ideas in mind. We probably will hit on some Bond music because the James Bond movie comes out next week, so we might do some of that. And then we'll talk some more news and new releases. So join us again next week. Anthony, where can folks find you on the internet if they want to hear more about you?
If they want to hear me ramble on about Doctor Who, I can be found
on. I always do.
Thank you, Alan. You're too kind. I can be found on the Watchers in the Fourth Dimension podcast, where we are watching our way through all of Doctor Who from 1963 till now. We are currently somewhere in 1971 in our watch through. You can find us at watchers4d.podbean.com or wherever you like to get your podcasts. And also on social media, we have a Facebook page, Watchers in the Fourth Dimension, Instagram and Twitter at Watchers4D.
Nice.
As it says, just here.
Rob, where can folks track you down?
You can find me at KDHX. I've got a radio show there called Juxtaposition. If you're busy living your life on Wednesdays, the shows are streamed for 2 weeks online at kdhx.org. And I also do a lot of different stuff. Ink19, needcoffee.com, a few other places. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter and the Insta, as the kids say.
Do they really, though?
I've heard it used by kids, so it frightened me.
Okay, because I say that, but that doesn't mean that kids say it.
Yeah. I thought they mostly said the gram.
That's only when they're buying drugs, though.
Ah, okay.
And so I have a little publishing company called cosmicpress.com. We have our first novel coming out very, very soon. It is a first novel by a new author called Rebecca Mabry, and it's a teen novel set in medieval Portugal, so it's a historical novel, and it's really good. It's called The Mad King, and I'm super excited for people to read it. So that's going to be out very soon, very, very soon, maybe in about 3 weeks. So look for that. And you know what? I should have said that I am also in a Bowie tribute band. We are called, what are we called? Jerome Newton and the Band That Fell to Earth. And I joined this band a few months ago, and I'm making my public debut as the drummer in this band 1 week from today. No, 1 week from yesterday.
Awesome.
So
I was about to say, you'd be on the show all covered in sweat and glitter next week.
Glitter. So Saturday, October 9th, we're playing in downtown Atlanta. We are going to be playing the entire Ziggy Stardust album.
Nice. And what's the venue for that, Alan?
It's it's an event called Porch Fest. So the venue, and it's an annual event. Lots of bands participate in it, and it's literally playing on somebody's porch.
Nice.
And I don't know the address. I'll post that or something. But so it's not like it's at a club or a bar or anything.
Right.
And we are working on putting together a show for the upcoming Bowie season, which includes his birthday and death day. Around January 8th, which is his birthday. So we will have a big show planned for that. So,
and I will say, for anyone watching, Alan and I have been in the audience for this band before Alan joined the band.
Yeah.
And I will attest, no clue on how good the new guy on the cans is, but I can attest the bands themselves are excellent and well worth going to see.
Yeah, a lot of fun. So anyway, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, viewers, for watching. Thank you for the couple of people who commented. We'll be back next Sunday night at 8 o'clock. And for now, we are out. Have a great week. Take care of each other. Be nice to each other. And we will see you in a week.